Hey, panel, thanks for coming out.
Hey, hey.
Um,
Hey, good to be back.
doesn't it seem like life moves faster or slower or something? The English Liberal leadership debate was like 3 days ago, and I can hardly remember it. What, Gary? Let's start with you. What do conservatives tell one another after a Liberal leadership debate? What's the word on the street, or what did you think of it?
Well, I'm glad to have the first crack. I mean, it reminds me of that old restaurant review. And the food was terrible, and the portion's so small. Uh, but look, first of all, I thought it was, quite frankly, both debates were fairly boring in terms of content. I think there's a few things that we learned from it. One, in the French language debate, we learned that Mr. Carney's French is not as good as was previously advertised. In a debate and scrum setting, he gave a scrum in English French that made no sense in both official languages. And then secondly, from the English debate, I had said previous to the debate in other media that, if Christopher Freeland or others wanted to try to make a difference in this race, they had to take a swing at Mr. Carney, throw a few haymakers. And it really felt like nobody was doing that they were sort of all in the bag for Mr. Carney. I mean, the only one to actually do a little bit of that was Karina Gould, and to her credit, she also said at one point in the debate that liberals had made mistakes, and so I give her credit for that. And she was the one who was, trying to get her elbows up and do a little bit more than the others. But I think for conservatives, there's very little in the takeaway for that, other than the fact that Carney's French is not great, and there's potentially a weakness to be exerted there. And secondly, he was asked a question at the end of the English debate in the scrum about his role in moving Brookfield's headquarters out of Toronto to New York. And that seems to be something that they've seized upon. And they've even crafted an ad recently that's gone out on that. So, but other than that, to me, there wasn't too much more that came out of it.
Okay. Marci, shortly before the debates, you announced to me that you've got a candidate you've got a dog in this race. Who are you rooting for in this campaign, and how did she do?
Well, thanks, Paul. I'm not officially on a campaign, but I am supporting Karina Gould in this race, and I do agree with Gary's assessment in terms of her performance at the debates, and frankly, her performance in the days leading up to the debates and since. She is bringing more of that feisty energy to this race, and to the extent that this race has much energy at all, it is mostly coming from Karina Gould in terms of actually taking on the presumptive front runner and ensuring that there is debate. When we last convened, we talked about, what was the importance of having a debate. And I would stand by what we said 2 weeks ago, not that we're always entirely prescient, but I think in this regard we were, that there needed to be some testing of Mr. Carney, some road testing, some tire kicking. That may not have happened to the extent that it needed to, but it did happen to some degree. We did see how he performed in a high pressure situation. It was obviously in French, not where it needs to be. That can be remedied, although time is short if the campaign is coming a month from now, but that can be remedied. The foundation is there. But as anybody who speaks French as a second language knows, it's all about practice, practice, practice. And obviously he'll need to practice before he's on a debate stage against Mr. Poliev and Monsieur Blanchet, should he win this leadership. The other thing, though, that I would note about the debate, I actually think that if you are someone for whom the Liberal Party of recent years, Mr. Trudeau's Liberal Party, felt a little frivolous, a little too virtue signaling, was not seriously governing at complicated times, you saw a very different Liberal Party on that stage from all four candidates. They were sober, they were serious. It may not have been as deep a dive on policy as needed to happen, but it was serious. There was nobody up there who did not look like they had Canada's best interests in mind, and that they were not in this to be authentic and to confront the moment, meet the moment where we are in Canada, which is a difficult moment, I think we can all admit. And so, as a liberal who is more of a centrist and wants to see a serious party emerge from this leadership, united and ready to govern again in a new mandate, I was pleased with what I saw. It did meet the moment for me, and I think for others.
And can I just chime in there in response? Because I think Marci makes a good point about the seriousness of the moment. And I think it provides an opportunity for conservatives to say, look, for the last 9 years, you could have been doing some of these things that now you've caught religion about, and you haven't done it. And so how are we supposed to trust you now? So I think that might provide an opening to conservatives in the days ahead.
Lisa Raitt had a good line on TV the other night. How can any of these people be expected to stand up to Donald Trump when none of them stood up to Justin Trudeau? Marci?
Great line.
Well, my friend Lisa always has a good quip and something insightful to say, no matter where she is. I actually think that every party goes through a period of renewal in a leadership. That is what's happening here, where some of those handcuffs come off. I mean, we work in a team sport as as active practitioners of politics. It is a team sport. It is not the norm in this country to run against the captain while you are still part of the team. That is what a leadership renewal process affords. That is what is happening right now. It's natural that there was not open criticism of the prime minister. There was late in the mandate, and we saw what happened. But in the years leading in, I mean, how could you? I mean, you can't openly question the prime minister when you're in the cabinet. Now's the time to do that. And I actually think that each of these candidates, Ms. Freeland, Ms. Gould, Mr. Bayless, to the extent that he's a newer, probably a newer face for many on the scene, they are now speaking not ill of Justin Trudeau, but of regrets that they have, and of business that didn't get done and business that needs to get done. So I just think this is natural party politics. And I would ask, I would just put it back the same way. There was not very much open criticism of previous conservative leaders until they were near the end of their tenure either.
Yeah. Allison, you're the luckiest one on the panel. You missed the debates. But like the rest of us, you're living in a world where Donald Trump says he's going to bring in his tariffs next week. Should I feel differently about this should I feel differently about next week than I did about last week? Is this going to change our politics, our economy? I'm starting to feel like everyone's baked tariffs into their expectations for the next little while. And everyone I know is looking for alternatives to the American products they would have bought. They're not waiting for the tariffs to launch their own personal boycotts. So tell me about what kind of moment you think we're all in.
That's a great question. So I think the positive side of this moment is, to your point, maybe we're focusing a little bit more on national unity, which was a problem before Donald Trump. And I think it's a great moment to think about how we work together as a country and stop playing up regional tensions. The other positive piece that we need to do right now is getting our house in order. And I've said this before, interprovincial trade barriers are one of the things that are frequently mentioned. But more than that, I don't want to see the idiocy of the last parliamentary session ever again. We ground our own government to a halt because of ego and vanity and trying to win. And it did nothing for the national interest. And I do like that we're thinking about the national interest now. We wasted a ton of money on probably the dumbest public policy piece I've ever seen, which was the tax cut holiday over Christmas. That made no sense from a social policy perspective or an economic perspective, and it could have buffered us much better against what we're facing now, which is much more serious. So I really do think the positive in all of this is that we need to really start thinking about diversifying our own economy, new relationships, investing in our industrial policy, and just having a much stronger game as a country. The second piece is, look, like, we're not going to diversify our way out of this. We started trade diversification with the last Trump administration. We are, I think, 77% of our exports go to the United States. That's not going to change overnight. I don't think that we should fight hubris with hubris and drama with drama. You don't give bullies oxygen. But what we really do need to do is start working bilaterally with the states and with Congress, looking at when I think the tides will change with consumers in the United States. And you're already seeing that coming out in, there was a Harris Decima poll that came out with about 66% of Americans saying they believe the tariffs are going to bring up prices for them. 44% believe that it's going to negatively affect the economy. Just yesterday, Texas business associations who voted for Trump are coming out and saying, look, this is going to decimate Texas. New Hampshire, Michigan, 20% of their jobs are in the auto industry compared to 2% on the Ontario side. This is all going to start mattering, just like it did last time with Sonny Perdue. So the more that this can get communicated back to Trump and that the damage he's going to do to the US economy with these tariffs is worse than whatever he's going to raise to offset tax cuts, that needs to continue to be communicated, because inflation is going up to 3.3%, I think, approximately. At the same time, you've got midterms coming in 2 years, and those members of Congress who typically do have a lot of control over tariffs are going to start being a little less complacent if people are really struggling in their districts.
Garry, do those tariffs ever come in? I'm starting to think that Trump's whole game is cheat and retreat. It's just going to be eternally, I'm going to have tariffs next week.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think some tariffs of some sort will come in, whether it's very focused on steel and aluminum, whether it's focused on other industries. But it also feels in the last week or 2 weeks that there is a sliding scale here, that depending on world events, depending on the vagaries of Mr. Trump, while the date keeps shifting. I mean, yesterday, I think it was, somebody asked him about Vladimir Zelensky and said, well, just like 3 days ago, you called him an autocrat and a dictator. And he said, I did? I don't recall saying that. So, if you can't remember what he said or pretending not to what he said there, there's no consistency. There's no policy consistency. And what we may be seeing here, to Allison's previous point, is increased pressure from Congress, from Trump-adjacent senators, Congress people, but also just the reality that people are starting to wake up to this, or the pressure from the different states, that this is going to have a negative impact on their economic futures. And I have heard this battle within, and we may have mentioned it last time, within Trump world, where you have the true MAGA believers who are saying, Mr. President, you have until the midterms to cement your agenda. You have to move fast and break things. And that is, evidenced mostly by, or in the image of Elon Musk, who was at cabinet the other day saying, we got to move fast and break things, and we're not going to get everything right on cutting spending and firing people. And we fired those Ebola people, but we brought them back. So that is one subset. And then there's the other set of the sort of more traditional economic Republican business, clique, billionaire class are saying, if you do X, this is going to hurt me in Y. And so that tension is real. And if there's anything we can do to play off of that, that would be great. So I think we're going to see this continued flux happening. But I do think there will be some tariffs of some sort, because I don't think Trump can just say, I'm going to impose tariffs and then not ever do it.
Okay. Is this new dynamic, is Trump world throwing up a new constellation of political leadership in the country? Are there people who are benefiting? I mean, it says in my Financial Times that the reason everyone's talking about Mark Carney is because of Donald Trump. And we just had an election in Ontario where it looks like running against Donald Trump worked pretty well for Doug Ford, maybe not spectacularly well. Marci, how do you think this weird new time changes our politics?
We've been saying it for the last number of months. I actually do think everyone is running against Donald Trump now, in one way or another. And Doug Ford, maybe it wasn't a spectacular result. It's also going into a third mandate. There are other factors there at play. But in terms of the campaign strategy, he did what he needed to do to get across the line. And now he has certainty for the next number of years. And so I do think it worked pretty effectively, again, for a party going into a third mandate with some other baggage that they're carrying. It made sure that they didn't have to face voters on those issue sets a little bit further from now. Mark Carney, in Canada, we've been talking about Mark Carney, will he, won't he, for quite some time. This is not simply a Donald Trump phenomenon, but what But what the second Trump presidency is created for Mark Carney is potentially the perfect storm. When he was contemplating for as long as he was, and I don't know, I'm not in Mark Carney's brain, but let's assume that this was something that he had designs on for some time when he returned to Canada. There didn't seem to be the right moment for a whole host of reasons, and now here he is, and he's walked right onto the stage, and not only is the money following him, but as of right now, the polls are more consistently favoring him, his Liberal Party, and I think that that's a very helpful frame if there is going to be a fairly quick snap election to continue to position adversarially to Donald Trump, even more so than to Mr. Poilievre. When we spoke 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about Mr. Poilievre's Canada First not pivot. I'm not sure that it has yet had the desired effect or result. Again, these things take a bit of time to track in polling, so it's not definitive yet. But he will continue to run against Trump to the extent that he can. Carney can very clearly stand and say, not only am I running in opposition to Trump, I am running as well for a strong Canadian economy that only I have the experience to build. And that seems to be highly salient and resonant right now. So it's that dual message track. It's both the defining ourselves by not being American, but also defining ourselves by being strongly Canadian and masters of our own domain. And that is what people want to hear right now. There is no question, Paul. There is not a political leader at any level right now, any order of government that could position otherwise and be successful.
Garry, it feels like Poilievre needs two sort of winter of early 2025 phenomena to blow over a little bit. He needs people to get over Mark Carney, and he needs people to get over Donald Trump. Are those likely to happen between now and the next election? Does the Conservative Party need to not pivot again?
Great line. On Mr. Carney, I think the Conservatives actually need this Liberal leadership race to be over, so that as long as you have this, yes, it looks like Carney, but this thing is still going on, and there is no definition. He's not the prime minister. He's the candidate for Liberal leader. There's still enough messiness, I think, in that message that it's hard to go head to head with Mr. Carney. So I think the Conservatives actually need that Liberal leadership race to be over, so that if Mr. Carney wins, they have a very clear. It's a one-on-one contest, right? And the Conservatives need to get that back to a one-on-one contest between who is best to lead the country, whose vision is best to lead the country, Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre. Right now, the challenge the Conservatives are having is that is not the debate Canadians are having. The debate is Carney on Trump or Poilievre on Trump. And that provides a bunch of distractions. So as you see the Conservatives come out with new ads, they're trying to get it back to Carney, right? He's sneaky. He's a liar. He's misled Canadians about his role in sending jobs to the United States. They actually have him on an ad juxtaposing his face with Trump about sending jobs back to the United States. So they need that contest, I think, to be over sooner rather than later, so that they can reset the terms of the debate one-on-one. Because as everyone has said here before, there is a Canadian moment here right now, and I actually think the hockey games actually help to amplify the Canadian nationalist spirit. I mean, I think there's no doubt about that. And Trump's response, and it was clear he was paying attention and following that, right? And so you have this mix of things that is going on in the country, and so to me, the faster the leadership race can be over, the better for the Conservatives, so they can really say, that's the guy who we are taking on, not Donald Trump, in terms of who's got the best vision for the country. And so I think that's what needs to happen for them.
And if I may, I think that every day that there's a Liberal leader installed as prime minister, the Liberal numbers are going to slide backwards, because that Liberal leader is going to have the same old Trudeau government to defend, essentially.
And can Jagmeet Singh get his numbers up at all? He has disappeared from the face of the earth. I mean, can we get can we get a milk carton with a missing picture on the guy out? I mean, man, the collapse of the NDP number is a story that really hasn't been told very much, but it is directly impacting the Liberal numbers. And frankly, I was shocked to see the NDP do as well as they did in Ontario last night, because they only got 18% of the vote. And I think part of that drag is directly attributed to Jagmeet Singh's non-leadership. And so, I mean, I'll give kudos to the NDP provincial GOTV machine here. They got 18% of the vote and still won, 27 seats and are the official opposition. The Liberals got 30% and only won 14. I mean, the seats. I mean, I was shocked by that. I thought it would go the other way. But, I mean, the Conservatives also need Mr. Singh to be doing better in the NDP, and that is just not happening.
This is why electoral reform is the favorite cause of third place parties everywhere. Because it's just brutal to be at the losing end of that distortion field.
I don't think Merit Stiles will be advocating for electoral reform anytime soon.
But Allison, it sounds like you're kind of in the same boat I am, which is that this Carney thing is going to be very hard to sustain. Is that a good read of what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just don't see how the numbers get any higher at this point, especially the longer you're bringing back the same caucus, the same prime minister, really, who's just not in charge, but you're still defending the record of the last government. So I just don't see how it goes up from there.
Marci,
so I would expect an election fast after.
I mean, I think Allison has just made the case for a very quick trip to the polls.
Okay. Well, I'll clear my calendar then. Let's talk again soon. Thanks for joining me, everybody.
Great to be with you, Paul.
Thank you.